Okay, let's look at FLL Lesson 74. We're going to be reviewing the 4 types of verbs: direct objects, indirect objects, predicate nominatives, and predicate adjectives. So first, let's talk about verbs. A verb is a word that does an action, shows a state of being, links two words together, or helps another verb. Hope you did your motions with it. That's fun. So action verbs show action. Verbs like find, choose, and carry are all action verbs. An action verb is sometimes followed by a direct object that receives the action of the verb. We're going to practice finding some direct objects. So if you have an action verb, you might also have a direct object. Okay, and it receives the action of the verb. Okay, so let's look at exercise 1. Mr. Sherman recommended a book. First, what's our verb? Recommended. Our subject, who recommended? Mr. Sherman. Now, what did he recommend? That's our direct object. What did he recommend? A book. So book is our direct object. And notice in the diagram, book comes after the verb because it receives the action of the verb, but it's on that same line. Now let's look at exercise 2. Mr. Sherman read Randall a book. What did he read? Did he read Randall? He read a book. So book is still our direct object, but now we have an indirect object, and that's Randall. Remember, an indirect object answers to whom or for whom the action is done. So read to whom? Read to Randall. He's our indirect object. So book receives the action of the verb read. That's our direct object. An indirect object is a noun or a pronoun that is between the action verb and the direct object of a sentence. It answers the questions to whom or for whom the action is done. But the words to or for are usually not in the sentence. Okay, let's see. Now let's look. Oh, and notice too on your diagram where the indirect object goes. So it's not written on the slanted line below red. It's actually written kind of on an offshoot, right? So you have the slanted line and then another line, and that's where your indirect object goes. It does not, nothing is written on that slanted line beneath your verb. So remember that. Okay, now we're going to look at exercise 3. So let's chant our helping verbs. Am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been, have, has, had, do, does, did, shall, will, should, would, may, might, must, can, could. So now we're going to look at exercise 4. We're going to circle the helping verbs and underline the action verbs. There may be more than one helping verb in the sentence. Each helping verb helps the action verb in the sentence by making it make sense in time and by showing time. So we're going to draw an arrow from each helping verb that we circle to the action verb that it helps. So let's look at number 1. I will be memorizing. I will be memorizing. Here we have 2 helping verbs and 1 action verb. Will and be are both helping verbs, so we're going to circle both of those. And then memorizing is our action verb, so underline memorizing, and then draw an arrow from your helping verbs, will and be, to your action verb, memorizing. I'm going to let you do 2 and 3 on your own. You can pause here to do those. I'm going to move on, but do 2 and 3 on your own. Okay, another type of verb is a state of being verb, and it just shows that you exist. So let's chant our state of being verbs. Am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. That's it. That's it's a shorter version of our helping verbs. So in exercise 5, we're going to read the sentences that have state of being verbs. We're going to circle the state of being verb in each sentence. Let's do one together. The spacecraft was in outer space. Okay, so this is telling us the spacecraft existed and it was in outer space. So was is our state of being verb. Go ahead and circle it. You can pause me and do 2 and 3 on your own. Exercise 6. There's one more type of verb, the linking verb. Linking verbs link or join two words together. These verbs are easy to recognize because they are the same verbs as our state of being verbs. Am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. These verbs can do 3 of the 4 parts of a verb definition, right? Because they can be helping verbs, state of being verbs, and linking verbs. Those am, is, are, was, were, being, been. Those can do all 3 things. Help, link, and just show that you exist. So it's really hard to figure out sometimes what kind of verb it is when it's in a sentence, but with practice, you start to recognize it. Okay, so let's look at exercise 6. The verbs am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been can help another verb, show a state of being, and link 2 words together. So if you see the verb was in a sentence, you have to read the whole sentence to tell what kind of verb it is. After you read each sentence in exercise 7, we're going to figure out what kind of verb these are in the sentence. So let's look at number 1. They are orbiting. So are is our verb, but what kind of verb is it? They are orbiting. Well, first of all, we have another verb in that sentence, right? Orbiting is a verb. So if we see more than one verb, it might be a good guess that it's a helping verb. And here it is, they are orbiting. If you just said they orbiting, that wouldn't make sense. So it needs are as a helping verb to help the sentence make sense. So they are orbiting. So write HV above are to show that it's a helping verb. Okay, number 2, they are in space. They are in space. Are again is our verb, but we got to think about what kind of verb it is. So they are in space. This is just telling us that these people exist and that they're in space, right? It's not really linking anything together. It's not helping another verb. It's just showing that they exist. So this is a state of being verb. You put SBV for state of being verb above are in this sentence. And number 3, they were excited. Here, were is our verb, and it's linking the subject they to an adjective that describes they, which is excited. Now that adjective, remember, is in our predicate, so it's a predicate adjective. But the important thing here is the verb is linking the subject to an adjective. So you'll write LV above were to show it's a linking verb. Now, let's look at exercise 8. We're going to look at this sentence and look at its diagram. Modern rockets are powerful. Well, we need to start with our verb to diagram, and that's what they did. Are is our verb. What are? Rockets. Rockets is our subject. What are rockets? Rockets are powerful. So notice where powerful goes. That line right in front of it is slanted. That's because our verb isn't an action verb, and powerful is not a direct object. Instead, we have a linking verb and a predicate adjective. So that's why it's slanted, because it's kind of like the adjective, this powerful is pointing back and describing the rockets. and renaming them to a certain extent. So that's why it's a slanted line there. And then we have an adjective modern, which describes rockets. Okay. Linking verbs can also link subjects with nouns and pronouns. So in exercise 9, we're going to read the sentence and look at its diagram. This one has a predicate nominative, not a predicate adjective. So it's a noun that renames the subject. Neil Armstrong was an astronaut. Here, our verb is was. Who was? Neil Armstrong. So he's our subject. He was what? He's an astronaut. So that is what renames our subject. Neil Armstrong, astronaut. So it's a predicate nominative. It's renaming the subject. And that's why we have another slanted line that looks like it's going to shoot an arrow off to our subject. And then an is an article, but here it's acting as an adjective that describes astronaut. Okay. I think that's all for this lesson. You really didn't have to do too much, nor did I. So if you need to go back over any part of that, didn't understand it, you can rewind me or talk to a parent.